you for coming. This afternoon we're honored to have Mary Danhauer with us. Mary was a former Ursuline. She's now an Ursuline associate. And Mary works as advanced practice nurse practitioner at Davis County Health Department, serving 7-county district. She's got a lot of hobbies, and if you drive past her home over in Sargo, you see some of those hobbies. She's a gardener. She has 10 chickens. She gathers her own eggs every day. She loves to be outdoors, and she loves to read. And Mary is going to be speaking to us on care for the earth. Why should we care? So I'll give you Mary.
Can everybody hear okay? Yes. I appreciate you all coming today. It means a lot to me, and it's an honor to stand before former community members, let me say it that way. But thank you very, very much for the invitation. It was something I kind of, when I got the invitation from Sister Mary Mathias, I kind of sat on it for a while because I was like, I don't know if I had anything to offer on this at all. But I think in looking back and reflecting on my life and how it's traveled through the years, I have grown to love the earth and feel very nourished when I work in the garden or I'm outside in nature itself. And that's been life-giving for me. I'd like to begin, it's going to be a little different. I'm not sure what other presenters have done, but this is going to be kind of meditative, prayerful, contemplative type of approach. And so I'd like to begin with a prayer of sorts to kind of set the stage. You who dwell in the mountains, yet cannot be contained by them, in your presence I realize how unlike a mountain I am. Your stillness reveals my frenetic pace. Your silence interrupts my noise. Your permanence punctuates my many changes. Yet you do not draw me to yourself simply to show me what I am not, but to remind me of what I can be. For my path does not lead me through steel and silent reaches of your timeless slopes, but along busy, noisy roads where things are ever changing. And it is just there that your pervasive presence invites me to open my eyes, to let myself feel and respond with genuine sincerity. You who dwell in the mountains, in your presence I am free to accept the reality and gift of my life. Today I want to share some thoughts with you about our home, Mother Earth. She's in very deep trouble because of what we humans have been doing since the start of the Industrial Revolution. At that point we started burning lots of different carbon products such as coal, oil, and gas. And the earth and nature knew to keep those deep in the earth because of what would happen if they were released. We release them to the atmosphere, and the carbon dioxide has been trapped in the atmosphere so that heat now builds up. The sunlight can't get through, it gets trapped, so it starts this vicious cycle. And that's what we are experiencing now, these increased levels of heating. I want to take a look at several aspects of global warming through the eye of the soul. The soul is that part of us that draws us to beauty, to quiet, to presence, and to enchantment. The soul of each of us wants to make connection with the soul of the earth, the soul of the elements of our world, both nature and non-human beings, or non-human things. The great Jesuit preacher, Father Walter Burckhardt, wrote, "Contemplation is a long, loving look at the real, at reality. That is what we will need to do to preserve the earth and ourselves in this pivotal time." My thoughts have been borrowed from Thomas More, who wrote The Care of the Soul and the Re-Enchantment of Everyday Life. And that's not the St. Thomas More. Okay. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. As we take that long, loving look at nature around us, we are making connections that our ancestors made with the world around them. They spoke of gods and goddesses. We speak in terms of quantum theory, quarks, and neutrinos. Somehow, we lose the mystery of nature and the earth because we see things mechanistically, like parts of a clock or cogs in a machine. It is only when we are aware of the earth as poetry that we truly live. Can you see those pictures? Do we need to dim the lights a little bit, or is that? Can we turn off maybe one row? Yeah. I want you to experience the pictures.
Middle one. Middle one.
There. Is that better? Okay. Good. All right.
Can you see?
I can see. Yeah, that's no problem. So we have to take time with nature. We have to read it as poetry, not take it literally, but to see what nature can teach us. There was, I was going to look it up, but I think it was St. Augustine said that if we don't get our relationship to nature right, we don't get our relationship with God right, which says an awful lot. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. Chief Seattle, such a wise man. We forget that we, humans, animals, plants, and non-living things, are all connected. We share the one life and breath and all the chemicals that make each of us who we are. When we destroy creation, we are destroying ourselves. All human institutions, professions, programs, and activities must now be judged by the extent to which they inhibit, ignore, or foster a human and earth relationship. From Thomas Berry. look at an example of ways that we're destroying our earth. We're destroying our bees. They're developing viruses, pesticides are killing them, the hives are dying off. And if you've ever stopped to think about the foods that we eat, any of our produce, it's all from pollination from bees. And it's not going to be a pretty world when those are gone. I heard on the news yesterday or the day before that they were studying the levels of cod in the eastern United States, the northeastern sections, and they knew that the cod levels were falling. They talked about it initially that you could walk across the bay on tops of all the cod. There was so much cod there. So they started restricting the amount of cod that people could, fish and get out of there. That didn't help either. So then they started seeing starfish and squid moving up along the Maine coast into the harbor of Maine, and have realized that the waters are warming and the cod cannot survive in that environment. They lay less eggs, they produce less young fingerlings and stuff. So, there's an example that's right here and now. The day is not far distant when humanity will realize that biologically it is faced with a choice between suicide and adoration. From Teilhard de Chardin. I think we're facing that right now, absolutely.
And what year did he live? That would have been back in the...
I think he died in the 70s, late, or maybe in the 80s, I'm not sure, but yeah.
1955.
1955? That's when he died?
Yes.
Okay, 55. So he's your generation, I was little at that point. Once again, until we realize the soul of creation and are able to stand or sit in contemplation or awe at the interconnectedness of all of creation, until we realize that connection, we will continue to plunder and abuse nature and creation. The earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. Mahatma Gandhi. For the longest time we have misread those words from Genesis, subdue the earth. We saw it as, take it as possession, it's ours, use it, abuse it, whatever. But it actually means that we need to be good stewards of all that is gift for us from the Creator. It doesn't mean that we have the right to use what nature offers selfishly, therefore depriving others of what is rightfully theirs. We must live simply so that others may simply live. We should think of our resources not as having been left to us by our parents, but as having been loaned to us by our children. This Kenyan proverb forces us to look forward instead of backwards. What we have been loaned from our children and not what we are leaving to them. That thinking of this is what we're leaving to our children hasn't really helped us, move us to do anything. So maybe looking at it in the backward piece, we are living and trying to leave them using what we have loaned from our children. We are called to assist the earth, to heal her wounds, and in the process, heal our own. Indeed, to embrace the whole creation in all its diversity, beauty, and wonder. Wangari Maathai. She was educated here in the U.S., I think in Kansas, and what she did when she went back to her home country in Kenya, was to try to work with women. She saw that, and it was taking more and more of their day to do that. So she gathered women and subsidized them to start planting trees. And what she did over the course of years, and also was an activist in the country, trying to better the government. The next slide. She received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004. Trying to fight for women's rights, promoting conservation, and trying to build a transparent government. Put in jail several times. I mean, she ran for office and lost several times, and then finally won. And just a tremendous woman, and just died within the last maybe 4 or 5 years from cancer. 4 years? 2011, yeah. Thank you. You're reading well, sister. I think, I want to say Nigeria for some reason, but I'm not sure. Oh, this one. What is the use of a house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? We're fast approaching an intolerable planet. Just the other day, they talked about heat index, in the near future is going to go into the 170s, 180s. Nobody, no human being can withstand that kind of temperature. Not good. So I'd like to look at the word ecology. And it's formed from 2 Greek words. The first one, oikos, O-I-K-O-S, which means home. And any type of home it can mean, from a temple, a home of the gods, or a planet. And this word seems to embrace our emotional search for a home. At the deepest level, ecology involves the spiritual practice of making a human home and, more mysteriously, finding a home for the soul. The second part of the word is logos, which means word. And it has a lot of spiritual overtones with it. Jesus is the logos, the word of God. It can also be used to denote divinity itself. So when you combine those 2 words, ecology then becomes an infinitely deep and mysterious notion of home. We are always making a home for the heart and always looking for the home of divinity. Ecology is the mystery of home, that planet that we call home. So this is just a short checklist of things that we can do to help Mother Earth, decrease our water consumption, decrease pesticide use, try to develop alternative energy sources, use fuel-efficient vehicles, there's a lot of work being done in a lot of different areas. At the Mount, you've really worked on recycling things. But one thing that upsets me is that they won't take styrofoam. They won't take certain kinds of plastic anymore. It's like, what can we do to get those things back on the list? Because they're just going to go to the dump, the landfills, and never degrade. The seas, yeah. Plastic bags, all of that's, you've got mountains of it in the ocean where it's all kind of gathered. Terrible. I saw some pictures of animals, like a turtle that, those the little plastic rings that you get with 6 packs of Cokes, well, this turtle had gotten inside of one of those, and it was all wrapped around its middle, and it was big on each end and constricted in the middle. Horrible, Still alive, yeah, looked like it, yeah. So try to think of other things that we can do as a community, as individuals, to help preserve the earth. You can control how much water you use. Those just simple little things. And there's going to start to be water wars where people are trying to get water and, taking it from the river and it belongs so-and-so downstream, and, it's going to be a big problem in the not too distant future. Only when the last tree has died, the last river has been poisoned, and the last fish has been caught, will we realize that we cannot eat money. That's all we're going to have left is money, but what can money get you if there's nothing out there to buy, to eat, to grow,
And look how long ago, 19th century,
19th century.
1800s.
Yes.
Was the earth being abused back at that time?
Absolutely, yes. We didn't realize it, but yes. I think your Native Americans could see what we ourselves could not see, because their connection to the earth is more like Mother Earth. It's the womb from which we came, and us as Europeans, it was ours to use and abuse. So I think this proverb, or this statement, teaches us a lot about what it is to live in a competitive, consumeristic world.
We need to send you to Congress.
No. Woo, they wouldn't like what I had to say. Any human being exists only as a member of the wider community of life, air, water, and soil. We have no existence apart from the living earth. We have no existence apart from the living earth. We are earth. What we do to earth, we do to ourselves. This is Michael Dowd. I don't know if anybody has read Thank God for Evolution. He wrote that. He's trying to go across the United States with his wife. She's an environmentalist, and they're trying. He's a pastor, and trying to do it, in religious settings, community settings, to develop this desire to save the earth.
Say the name of the book.
Thank God for Evolution. There's a sobering thought that, plants can live without us, but we cannot live without plants because of the oxygen-carbon dioxide exchange. They take in our carbon dioxide, give off oxygen. We take in the oxygen, give off carbon dioxide. So if we look at, yeah. If we look at how nature interacts with each other and how we should interact with nature ourselves, just to realize that one assumption, you know, if we as human beings were to you know, be gone, the plants would still be here. Okay, this is a TED Talk by David Roberts. And have you ever listened to TED Talks? They're like 15 minutes of around a topic. And he talks about it. It's entitled, "Climate Change is Simple." Is it coming up yet?
Not yet.
Oops, no, that's the end. Okay. There we go, there we go.
Oh,
Hi. This talk started out of a Twitter conversation. I haven't decided whether to be embarrassed about that or not. But I was on Twitter one day, and a relatively prominent left-of-center pundit piped up and said, you know, climate change seems like a really big deal. Why are so few people talking about it? Why have so few thought leaders made it their signature issue? And another reasonably prominent left-of-center pundit piped up and said, well, for my part, the reason I don't talk about it is it seems really complicated. I don't feel like I have a good grasp on all the science, and so I just don't feel qualified to go out and say and assert things publicly about it. And anybody who has ever so much as mentioned climate change on television or on the internet will understand why this person thinks the way they do. Anytime you mention it, the hordes descend, bearing complicated stories about the medieval ice age or sunspots or water vapor. And you know, there's a lot of myths about climate change born by these climate skeptics, but to debunk those myths, you have to know, you have to go online and research and read and be able to respond to them in detail, and a lot of people just find that prospect dreary, and so they don't bother. And this, of course, drives me crazy. So I piped up on Twitter and said, you know, climate change is not actually that complicated. What you need to know to be able to speak out publicly about it, just about the basic structure of the problem, is really not that complicated. I could explain it to you in 15 minutes. So let this be a lesson to you. Don't go talk smack on Twitter unless you're willing to back it up. So one thing led to another, and here I am with 15 minutes to explain climate change to you. So let's get started. Why is the Earth not a cold, dead rock floating in space? The reason is that it is enveloped by this tiny, tiny, thin layer of gases and chemicals that we call our atmosphere. So the sun's energy, rather than just coming down and bouncing right back off, it comes down and is held close to the surface of the Earth for a while and then bounces off. And that, this is a simple process, is why we have evaporation and precipitation and photosynthesis and life on our planet. So scientists discovered well over 100 years ago that the atmosphere and the systems on the Earth are in this dynamic relationship, and you can change the chemical composition of the atmosphere and hold more of the sun's energy for longer. The energy still has to escape, of course, but in the meantime it will cause changes in these biophysical systems of the Earth. And you often hear people say the Earth has always changed, the climate has always changed, and that's true, it has. This relationship between the atmosphere and the systems, they go through cycles, but these cycles have typically taken hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. The key thing to know first is that for the last 10,000 years on Earth, the climate has been relatively stable, unusually stable. And by stable, I mean temperature has varied, it's gone up and down, but it's stayed in a fairly narrow band of about plus or minus 1 degree Celsius. And all of advanced human civilization has taken place during this 10,000 years. The development of agriculture, the written word, the wheel, the iPhone, everything we know, everything we have built, we have done in this period of relative climate stability. So what we've been doing for the last couple of hundred years is digging up carbon out of the earth and throwing it up into the atmosphere and changing the chemical composition of the atmosphere, like has happened in the past, except for way, 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 way faster. In geological time, the blink of an eye, we are substantially changing the chemical composition of the atmosphere, and all of climate science has been about what's going to happen, what is the Earth going to do in response to this. And so we've already seen that the process is underway. We have measured, we have witnessed, observed with our eyes and our thermometers about a 0.8 degree Celsius rise in global average temperature since before the industrial age, since before we started digging all this carbon up. And this may not seem like a lot, less than 1 degree Celsius, but the thing to know about it is these greenhouse gases we throw up stay in the atmosphere for a very long time. There are very long time lags involved here. So this 0.8 degree temperature rise is a response to what we were doing 50 to 100 years ago. And what we see in the first half of this century will be a response to what we've done the last 50 years. And what we see in the latter half of this century will be a response to decisions we make today. So the question is, temperature is rising. How high does it have to rise before we need to worry, before we're in danger, before bad things start happening? The typical answer to this question has been 2 degrees Celsius. Anyone who has followed climate change discussions knows that this 2 degree number has taken on a kind of iconic quality. To model what it will cost to do something about climate change, or what it's worth, or what various policies will cost, model 2 degrees centigrade. So obviously, what counts as not dangerous versus dangerous is not a hard scientific question. It's a political question, and this was a political decision to take this 2C number, mainly made by European climate negotiators well over 10 years ago. And it's just sort of stuck since then. All the countries involved in climate negotiations have basically signed on saying, yes, this is what we want to avoid, 2 degrees centigrade temperature rise. The bad news on this 2C number is twofold. First of all the latest science done in the last 10 to 15 years has pointed to the conclusion that those impacts we thought were going to happen around 2 degrees centigrade are in fact going to happen much earlier than that. The climate is more sensitive to this added greenhouse gases than we thought. So if those were the impacts we were worried about, then the real threshold of safety ought to be something like 1.5 degrees centigrade. James Hansen is the climate scientist most famously known for raising these warnings, but it's a growing scientific consensus that 2 degrees is in fact dangerously high, which is bad because we are almost certainly going to blow past 2 degrees Celsius. There's some reason to believe, a recent study said that even if we stopped our climate emissions tomorrow, we're still going to get more than 3 degrees this century just from momentum from the previous emissions. But stopping at 2 degrees now would take a level of global coordination and ambition that is nowhere in evidence. So a lot of climate scientists don't really want to tell you this because they don't want to depress you, but I'm just a blogger, so I'm happy to depress you. 2 degrees Celsius is probably off the table. So then the question becomes, well, what does it look like if temperature goes higher than that? What would, say, 4 degrees Celsius look like? Oddly, there hadn't really been a lot of concerted scientific attention to that question because climate scientists honestly thought we wouldn't do that to ourselves. But we are doing it to ourselves. So in 2009, several climate change research groups in England drew together a group of scientists, commissioned some papers, and had them really take a hard look for the first time. What would 4 degrees Celsius look like? There were a lot of papers, a lot of equations, a lot of talk and complexity. I have helpfully paraphrased it here for you to make it easier to grasp. 4 degrees Celsius temperature rise would look ugly. Among other things, that would be the hottest the Earth has been in 30 million years. Sea levels would rise at least 3 to 6 feet, and this excludes some really tail end possibilities, but 3 to 6 feet at least. And persistent drought would cover about 40% of the currently occupied land on Earth, which would wreak havoc on agriculture in East Asia, in Africa, South America, Western US. All this combined would produce hundreds of millions of people who had been driven from their homes, either by their cities being swamped by sea level rise, or by hunger, or by all the attendant ills that come along with those things. And to boot, probably somewhere around half of the known species on Earth would go extinct. This question of pinning down the exact number of species is very difficult. This is very much an approximation, but some substantial chunk of life on Earth would be wiped out. The final bit of bad news, that's not true, there's more bad news to come. A middle bit of bad news is that according to a recent paper by the International Energy Agency, we are currently on track, if we keep doing what we're now doing, if we go on with business as usual, as it's called, we are now on track for 6 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century. Something, 5 to 7. These are obviously estimations. So if 4 degrees is hell on Earth, I'll let your imaginations fill in the blanks on 6 degrees. But one danger that comes up when we contemplate going this high with our temperature is the possibility that climate change will become irreversible. I think when people typically think about climate change, they think, oh, temperature is going to rise X amount, circumstances will change, some places will get warmer, some places will get wetter, we'll adjust, we'll move our farms around, people will migrate from one city to another, we'll get resettled, and we'll go on with life. The really dangerous possibility is that what are called, the Earth has several of what are called positive feedback systems. So for instance, in Siberia, there's this permanent ice, the permafrost, and it contains a bunch of methane in it. As it melts, it releases that methane. The methane causes more warming, which melts more ice, which releases more methane. It's a self-sustaining process. Or sea ice melts. Ice is white, it reflects energy. When it melts, it becomes dark blue and absorbs more energy, which heats the oceans, which melts more ice, which creates more dark surfaces. You see, there's a number of these systems that are self-perpetuating. And the great danger of climate change that towers above all these other more specific dangers is that these positive feedback systems will take on a momentum of their own that becomes unstoppable. And human beings will lose any ability to control it at all, even if we stop all our climate emissions on a dime. Will that happen at 2 degrees? Probably not, though there's a real chance of it, and there's a lot of debate about that. Will it happen at 4 degrees? Well, it looks a lot more likely at 4 degrees. Will it happen at 6 degrees? Almost certainly. So if we continue on our present course, climate change will probably take on a life of its own, spiral out of control, and according to a recent paper, by 2300, we could see temperature rise of up to 12 degrees centigrade. Now, if that happened, something like half the Earth's currently inhabited land would become too hot to survive on. And when I say too hot to survive on, I don't mean it's difficult to grow beans or air conditioning bills are inconveniently high. I mean, if you go outside, you die of hotness. I mean, places that were an average of 80 degrees Fahrenheit will now be an average of 170, 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Literally too hot for human beings to go outside and survive. So, will there still be human civilization under those circumstances? Who knows? I mean, maybe we'll live in underground climate-controlled caves, maybe we'll grow food in test tubes, but that wouldn't look anything like Earth as we now know it. It would look a lot more like Newt Gingrich's moon colony, assuming any human beings, or at least enough to make a civilization, survived in those circumstances. So, when I say climate change is simple, I know this has been bugging you. You're not used to thinking in Celsius, those strange European metric temperatures. So here's good American Fahrenheit. It's just as ugly. So this is what I mean by climate change being simple. There are many complicated and fascinating discussions to be had about what to do about it, or about what effect our actions might have on the climate and when, or which policies are best based on cost-benefit analysis. There's complexity, plenty of complexity for those of you who like complexity. But we now know, to a fair degree of certainty, that if we keep doing what we're now doing, we will face unthinkable catastrophe. That's the bumper sticker, that's the take-home message. And that, saying, I don't want to talk about that because I don't know the ins and outs, is like saying, I don't want to raise alarms about Hitler's army being 100 miles out because I don't know the thread count of their uniforms, or I don't know the average calorie intake of a German soldier. You don't need to know those things to be scared that the army's on the march and to raise alarms about it. Similarly, if we keep doing what we're now doing, we are screwed. This we know now. To stabilize temperature, and I don't mean stabilize temperature at 2 degrees or 4 degrees or 6 degrees, I mean to ever have a hope of ever again having a stable temperature of any kind, global climate change emissions need to peak, stop growing, peak, and start falling rapidly in the next 5 to 10 years. Every year we do not get started on this, we add, according to the International Energy Agency, an extra $500 billion with a B dollars to the price tag of what it's going to cost us to do this eventually. Every year we wait, that's $500 billion down the drain. Now, you and I look around at current politics, particularly US politics, and massive, coordinated, intelligent, ambitious action does not strike us as particularly plausible. In fact, it might strike us as impossible, but that is where we are, stuck between the impossible and the unthinkable. So your job, anyone who hears this, for the rest of your life, your job is to make the impossible possible. Thank you.
Not very hopeful, is it? I think he's very realistic in what he's seeing as coming. There is a UN climate change talks coming up in Paris in December. So keep an eye on the news for what comes out of there. You can always watch for notices of bills that are coming up in the state and the national arena to vote on to encourage climate change. I mean, people are still saying that it's something the scientists, made up, and it's certainly not that at all. It's a real evidential thing that's happening, and it's our home. If we don't take care of our home, we'll have no place to live.
Where's the evergreen state?
Might be Washington, maybe, I'm not sure. Evergreen?
What was the question?
Yes. Well, I'm sorry. Where's the evergreen state? And I think Washington State. Yes, ma'am.
This maybe could put me off the topic, if it is, just handle it. But, can you give us a little bit of information? I mean, probably everybody knows it but me, but I don't know it. El Nino, exactly what do you mean? Are we in an El Nino now?
We are in an El Nino now. It's where the ocean waters are warmer off of the Pacific, the lower Pacific coast, and that affects the jet stream and how much moisture is flowing over the United States. That's simple I know of it.
There was something on the news last night about that, about the sharks coming into the
Mhm.
Yeah.
seashore.
Yes,
And that's an indication that El Nino is on its way.
yes, yes. And it's going to affect our weather. You're seeing more severe storms. There's a cyclone in I think the Arabian Sea that's developing, and it's the third one since, I don't know, way back, that's developed. And it's the largest cyclone that they've seen in that area forever. So, and they just had the largest hurricane that hit Mexico and came up into Texas and on up. You're looking at 12, 15 inches of rain, in Texas. I measured mine and I had 5 inches here, just in a period of 2 days. So, those extremes of weather, you're going to see the extremes of drought, you're going to see just all of those things are playing into it. And it's going to be those who are poor, who are on the margins, that live in the lower regions of islands that are going to be affected. It's always the poor, that get affected. Us people with some money, we can move to a degree. You're going to see more refugees moving out of areas of conflict. I mean, it's just, things are in such a chaos.
Does anyone argue that this is God's way of ending the world?
I think that would maybe putting it too simplistically. It's something we have done to the earth, to our planet. That's putting the blame on somebody else, so you can say, oh, well, God did that, so, we're going to suffer it. But this is something that requires us to do something for our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-nieces and nephews, down the line, if there's ever going to be anything left for them.
What year was that video made?
I think it's pretty recent, in the last 2 years maybe, something like that.
5 more years.
Yeah, we're running out of time already.
If we watch Michelle Morrick's stuff, we'll get things to do about climate change.
Good. Michelle Morrick's, some of her work out of the UN with the women,
For the
religious
climate
and
talks?
women's.
Yes.
Wonderful.
What is?
It's Michelle Morrick. It's going wonderful. Good. I think you're very blessed to have somebody in that position, that can feed you things directly. So look for emails, look for things that you can do. I know Eva passes those on through the emails, so be aware of those things. And talk about it, among yourselves here, but among your family members. Try to educate them. That's going to be the key, is educating people that it is real, it's happening. If we don't act now, we're not going to have anything to live on.
I hear you say that, and I've heard it for a long time, but I really don't believe it. I mean, it's just like, how could that be?
Uh-huh. Eva says that she's heard that, that we're not going to have anything left if we don't act now, but she's heard it for a long time. How can that be,
I mean, I just think that can't be.
That can't be, yeah, it is.
I'm not-
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your mind around it. Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I don't think we will see it,
No,
but it will happen to our earth.
absolutely.
Things are happening right now that
Yes, yes.
was unheard of
Already see.
50 years ago.
We are already seeing it, absolutely. Yes, yes. Floods, warmer temperatures. You're not getting as much snow as we used to have. It's warmer now. November, I think, is going to be a lot warmer for us in our area this year. It's happening. You're seeing animals that say, like cooler climates are moving further up the mountains where it's cooler now, instead of staying down low where they've been for years. Burning, in the Amazon forest, burning down trees, to plant more crops or to grow cattle, There's a system of thought called that Earth is Gaia, which is a living body, and the Earth has its own water system, its own circulatory system, which would be your waters. It has its own air system or breathing, which would be your trees. You can see the Earth as a living being structure. So anything that you can read on these topics would be very, very important for you. I can't encourage reading any more.
The Holy Father seemed to me, by reading before you came, his main reason for coming was climate control. Am I wrong on that?
I'm not sure on that. I'm not sure.
I mean, his encyclical.
Yes, the encyclical came out with that, yes. Mhm.
But I didn't feel like that, I had read that we would hear all about this in the churches and it would be talked about. I haven't heard it talked about that much.
It hasn't been mentioned much in the churches. No.
One of the people that are making light of it and saying that's just hoo-ha.
Mhm.
They're increasing the danger.
Right, because she said that the people who are making it, out like it's not a real reality, that they're making things worse because, trying to discount it, but it's a real thing. And it doesn't take much contemplation or long loving looks at nature and our earth to know what's happening.
When they were talking about the magnetic field too, that's a real problem.
The magnetic field, the sun had a huge hole in it that was the size of 50 Earths, like maybe a week or two ago, that put out a lot of solar winds, which affects all of our satellites and transmission of data and images and everything, So this magnetic field, it got attracted to those. You have magnetic fields on each end of the Earth at your poles, and that helps regulate some of this energy around the Earth. There's.
Right off there.
I think Mother Earth loves us enough to hold on to us. If we can love her enough to provide for her,
They said it could be serious by
2300, 2020. That's not too far off. It could be really serious by year 2020.
It really makes you feel guilty to get in a car every time you get in here.
Yes. Makes you want to go back to horse and buggy almost. Bicycles, absolutely. Walking. Catherine Marie, do you have
I
something?
just wanted to hear what someone else was saying up there. They talked.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And it went
Yeah.
that way.
Okay, I'd like to close with the song, and it's a love song to the earth. That'll be our last. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
This is an open letter from you and me together. Tomorrow's in our hands now. From the words word, say them out loud. I'll make it better somehow. Looking down from up on the moon, as you're talking about my moon. Who'd have thought that I would stand on? Could be so fragile. This is a love song to the earth. You are, and I am the universe. It's our world. 'Cause it's our world.
Thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure and honor to present this to you.
Thank you.